She always wrote in blue ink, thick cursive loops like she was signing love letters to herself. The envelope was cream-colored, thick enough to feel expensive when I held it. I knew what was inside before I opened it. Hell, I could smell it: rosewater, perfume, arrogance, and legal betrayal. My name is Malcolm. I'm 48, and for most of my life I lived in the echo of a man who practically raised me. My grandfather was everything my father couldn't be: steady, sharp, and patient in a way that made even silence feel like a lesson. I'm not married, never got around to it. Spent too many years putting my life on pause to take care of the family, or what was left of it. When Grandpa had his first stroke, I moved into the guest room without hesitation. No speeches, no announcements. Just packed up my apartment and drove the 4 miles to his house by the lake, took early retirement from the landscaping business. I told myself I'd go back once he was better. He never got better. The last few years weren't easy. I changed his sheets at 2 a.m., spooned pudding into his mouth when he couldn't chew, and talked him through long, broken nights when sleep wouldn't find him. I learned every detail of his prescriptions. I measured his blood pressure like clockwork. On better days, I'd push his wheelchair into the backyard so we could sit in the sun with a pair of orange sodas, just like we used to when I was 9. People said I gave up everything. I didn't see it that way. That man built me. Every calloused lesson, every weekend sanding down busted lawnmower blades until my hands ached like his, none of it felt wasted. Opening that letter, though, I felt like I was standing on a trapdoor I hadn't noticed until it opened under me. It wasn't even formal, just a typed note with cold bullet points and a signature in blue ink. My cousin Riley's name came up 4 times. Mine, nowhere, no explanation, no apology, just lines about distribution of assets with her chirpy signature in the bottom corner like she was approving a grocery list. I sat there staring at it, and the weight of it sank into my chest like wet cement. I knew what this was. I'd seen the signs: her sudden interest, the way she swooped in toward the end, showing up in brand new boots even though she never could stand the country air. Always calling him Papa like she'd used the name all her life. She took selfies with him in the hospital, filtered the wrinkles out. I should have known, but I didn't think she'd actually do it. Not this. The will she filed named her as sole beneficiary, not just the house. Everything. The war bonds, the savings account, the lakefront land, the old Studebaker in the garage. I couldn't breathe reading her breakdown of her plans for the property. She even thanked me politely in a footnote. Malcolm's support during Grandpa's final years is deeply appreciated. Appreciated? I couldn't feel my hands. I must have read that damned letter 10 times, each line hotter than the last. Part of me wanted to scream. The other part just folded in on itself, quiet and ashamed, like I'd made up the whole life we shared. It would have been easier if he'd changed, if he'd fallen under her spell those last few weeks. But he hadn't. I'd been there. In his good moments, he still joked with me, still called me kid, even with his voice failing. "This place will be yours, Malcolm," he said not 3 months ago while I was helping him into bed. "Don't let it rot like your uncle's barn. Fix it up, keep it alive." So when I saw that letter, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like erasure, like someone had hit backspace on a lifetime and decided none of it counted because it wasn't flashy enough to post online. What hit hardest wasn't the money. It was the fact that no one questioned it. Not the lawyer, not the rest of the family. Riley passed around copies like party favors, chin up, voice trembling in practiced grief. My phone didn't ring. Nobody asked me what Grandpa really wanted. And when the memorial came, a tidy afternoon held in the rented greenhouse she always loved, I wasn't invited. I stood outside anyway. I parked across the street, hidden behind my old truck's windshield glare, and watched the guests trickle in like they were stepping onto some stage. Laughter, as if mourning had to be photogenic. Balloons, lavender-scented napkins. A framed quote about letting go, letting go. I sat there a long time after they left, watching one of the gardeners collect the folding chairs while Riley posed for a selfie with the urn like it was a birthday cake. In my pocket, I folded and refolded the corners of her letter until the paper started to split. That was when I started to remember, not just what he'd said that night, but something else, something tactile. A conversation from months ago, half lost in the haze of late-night TV and painkillers. "You remember the box, don't you?" he'd whispered. "What box?" I'd asked, fluffing his pillow. "The metal one. Behind the panel." He smiled faintly, his eyes already drooping. "That's the one they won't know to look for." At the time, I thought he was dreaming. I let it go. But now, 3 days after getting her letter, that sentence played over and over in my head. And I started to wonder. I was the one who found him early Tuesday, the sun barely blinking through the kitchen blinds. I'd heard the soft wheeze of the oxygen machine go quiet an hour earlier, but I told myself it was the tubing again. It wasn't. He lay there in stillness, his jaw slack, the soft sag of his brow reminding me of when I was a boy and he'd nap on the porch while cicadas tuned the background. Only this time, the rise and fall of his chest didn't come back. It took me a solid minute to move. His hand was resting loosely on the quilt I'd tucked in the night before, a little colder than it should have been, but not icy. I whispered his name once, then again louder. Nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed, tried to remember how to breathe, called the hospice nurse. Then I just sat there, holding his hand until they came. The days after blurred. Calls, signatures, more calls. Kind strangers from the funeral home asking about him preferences and whether we wanted to include military service in the obituary. I said yes, he would have liked that. Riley didn't return my message about sharing responsibilities, but that didn't surprise me. Then the will was filed. Some cousin I hadn't seen in years texted me a screenshot. Did you know Riley's claiming full inheritance? I still remember my first thought, this must be some early draft. She got confused. She must have grabbed the wrong copy, but she hadn't. When the lawyer opened the envelope Riley had submitted to the probate court, and I sat across that polished desk with hands gripped so hard they ached, I could feel I could hear each absence. My name wasn't anywhere. No clauses about caring for him, no indication I'd lived in that house for nearly 4 years. No mention of the rusted Studebaker I'd restored for him last summer. Nothing but Riley's name spelled out like a signature on his soul. I stared at the document, blinking, heart stumbling like it had lost the beat. And then came Riley smiling with swallowed smugness, blinking too often, as if performing some internal script. "I'm as surprised as you are," she said, insincerely soft, like her voice came trimmed with sympathy. She dabbed just under one eye with a tissue, leaving barely a mark of moisture. I watched her scan the room to see who was watching her mourn. I didn't say anything. Not then. I left that office like my skin didn't fit right anymore. Walking felt too loud. I sat in my truck outside for 15, maybe 20 minutes. The radio off. My breath fogged the glass, and still I couldn't find the words to explain what had happened. Did I miss something? Had he really changed the will? And if so, why? It ate me alive for 3 days. Phone calls were uncomfortable, strained. My Aunt Riley's mother left me a voicemail saying it was probably just how he wanted it. She sounded tired, like saying my name drained her. A silence settled around me, thick, ungiving. Friends I hadn't heard from in months resurfaced with cautious sympathy. "I'm sorry, Mal, that's rough." They meant well, but even kindness stung, because what could they really know? The worst part, worse than Riley's crocodile tears and that god-awful eulogy she gave at a memorial I wasn't welcome at, was the doubt creeping in from the corners of my heart. I started asking myself if I'd imagined our closeness. If maybe Grandpa had felt something I hadn't seen. Had I misunderstood his silences, our routines? I thought of every good night I whispered to him in those final weeks. Every TV tray I set down with his favorite sandwich, egg salad with the crusts cut off. Every quiet, mutual glance when we knew things were nearing the end and chose not to say it out loud. Could someone fake that? Had I projected love where there was just obligation? But then I found the message. Wedged in the back of my glove compartment, buried under a stack of old insurance forms and expired coupons, was the birthday card he gave me 2 months before he passed. I'd thrown it in there during a trip to the pharmacy. Just a simple 4x6 card, a watercolor of a fishing dock on the front. Inside, his handwriting, instead of the usual "Love, Grandpa," was longer than I remembered. "Malcolm, thank you for keeping me here, for your strength, your peace, and your stubborn refusal to leave me behind. This house, this land, it means nothing without someone like you. It's yours. Don't let anyone say different." I must have read that line 10 times before I realized I was gripping the paper like rope. The ink had smudged slightly around "It's yours," as if he'd hesitated, or maybe his hand had trembled. I tasted something hot in the back of my throat. Relief, rage, couldn't tell. That night I didn't sleep. Lay awake listening to the walls of that too-quiet house echo with history only I seemed to recall. The tile grout he'd taught me to scrub, the jammed cabinet lock he never got around to fixing. How he'd mutter to himself in the kitchen while peeling an orange like he was in conversation with ghosts. And then I remembered the box. Not just the concept of it, but exactly where it was. The workshop, false panel. He told me once long ago after he sold the small boat we used to take out for summer fishing, a man shouldn't die with unfinished pockets. At the time I'd laughed, chalked it up to his signature weird metaphors. But now, a switch flipped, I could see every detail. The box was real, and if his words meant what I thought they did, it hadn't ended here, not even close. I didn't even turn on the lights when I got to the workshop. The rising sun melted frost from the windows, casting pale streaks across the dust and sawdust that still clung to every flat surface just as he'd left it. My breath hung in the air like a weightless ghost as I stepped inside, feeling each creak of the floorboards resonate somewhere deep in my memory. It had been years since I'd opened the false panel under the pegboard, but my fingers found the groove instinctively slid between veneer and frame, pressed just right, and it gave with a soft pop like a sigh of relief. Behind it was the box, still there, dented a little more than I remembered, dark green, the hinges rusted along the edge. I knelt down and ran a hand over its surface, cold metal. His initials scratched into the corner from a screwdriver back when he first taught me how to hold one properly. I mouthed the code to myself as I entered it, 4 to 2 to 7 to 3, my birthday, his fishing pin number. It always meant something deeper with him. The lock clicked, the lid squealed open. Inside, 2 envelopes, a tarnished silver money clip, and a thin stack of yellowed paperwork tied with twine. Not much, but enough. Everything he ever truly valued could fit in here. I reached for the thinner envelope first, my name on it in his dry, angular script. The paper smelled faintly like pipe tobacco and cedar. Inside, a single sheet. Mel, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't finish what I planned. I started the process. The new will is in here, signed, witnessed, legal. I didn't tell Riley, and I sure as hell didn't trust her with anything important. You know why? I'm sorry I didn't push it through the court before things got worse. But I know you'll figure it out. I hate that I'm leaving this burden for you, but if anyone can carry it, it's you. Don't let her take what you've earned. Don't let her rewrite our story. Love always, Grandpa. I stared at the page until the letters blurred. There were tears, but they didn't fall. They just brimmed, hanging behind my lashes like rain held in an overcast sky. When I reached for the will itself, 2 folded sheets of legal paper, thick-stocked, the weight of it was heavier than you'd think. Not just the paper, but the meaning. Dated August 17th of last year, 3 months before he died. 2 witnesses, Kurt Franklin and Lydia Arlo, names I recognized. Part-time employees from town, and my name not just written but woven through every clause. In the event of my death, I hereby leave the primary residence located at 419 Halberd Lane, its adjacent workshop and outbuildings, and its furniture and fixtures therein, to my grandson, Malcolm Everett. The land, the house, the Studebaker, even his small stock portfolio and the cash savings Riley had already begun dipping into. All mine, all properly assigned. I laughed, and it wasn't light. It came ragged and short, like a cough wrapped in something darker. My hands shook, not from cold, but from a crash of relief and fury cracking through me like a dam breaking. She had replaced this will. Swapped it with something doctored, maybe an earlier draft or worse. She'd banked on him being gone and no one noticing. Maybe she thought I wouldn't have the nerve. Maybe she thought I'd roll over, mourn in private, and let her paint herself as the golden heir. She didn't just steal from me, she erased me, but he'd known, he'd seen it coming. I took everything from the box, slipped it into a plastic evidence sleeve I had left from my time doing inventory audits years ago, retrieved my phone, snapped 5 photos of the will, both pages, front and back. Then the envelope, my name on it. I found the utility bill on the desk, his name, address, the date, proof of his residence. I grabbed it, too. Back at the car, I sat in the passenger seat, the door still open, and stared at the tree line for a long while. Sent the pictures to 2 places, my private email and a friend of mine who worked at a document firm for insurance claims. Not legally binding, no, not yet, but breadcrumbs. Because I knew better than to walk into court without a trail. On the way back into town, I took a detour, stopped by the Franklin family farm. Kurt was hauling hay into the back of a rust-colored truck when he spotted me. I hadn't seen him since the funeral, though I wasn't sure he'd even attended. He wiped his hands on his jeans and met me halfway. I didn't bother with small talk. You remember signing something for my grandfather back in August? He squinted at me. At the time Lydia and me stopped by, he said he had new papers needing witnesses. Offered us cold lemonade and everything. That's the one. I pulled out the will, let him glance over his own signature. He nodded, definitive. Yeah, that's it. You willing to sign a statement confirming that? His gaze didn't waver. Sure, then after a second quieter, I always thought it was odd the lawyer said there was no new version. Buddy of mine works over at City Records, thought for sure this house would go to you. And then something strange happened. He patted my shoulder and said, "Good on you for not letting it go." I didn't answer. Just got in the car and headed toward Lydia's. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't out. I didn't sleep that night either. Not because of grief this time, but clarity. Pure hard-edged resolve buzzing under my skin. I had the will, I had the names, I had the words my grandfather left behind. Now I needed to be careful, deliberate, because paperwork may be sacred in court, but timing, that's everything. The next morning I drove down to the county clerk's office before they even flipped the sign to open. I took a seat in that waiting room, staring at the chipped linoleum, the low humming lights, and the pens attached to plastic chains. My palms sweated as I gripped the envelope. When they finally called me up, I handed it to the probate clerk like it was made of glass. "This is a revised will," I said. "Last one, signed and witnessed. My grandfather Arthur Everett." The clerk, a lean woman in her 60s with half-moon glasses and a steady stare, raised an eyebrow. She took the envelope and opened it, eyes scanning the top line. Her fingers slowed as she reached the date. "This is post-dated from the one currently on file," she said. "I know," I said. My throat felt dry. "It was hidden, I just found it." She looked up at me, something shifting in her expression. Not doubt, more like appraisal. "You'll need an attorney. This is going to get complicated." "I already have one. His name's Rob Menley. I'll be bringing him a copy this afternoon." The envelope was left with them after they scanned and sealed it with temporary chain of custody. She gave me the case number and told me it would be flagged for review. That was step one. Quiet, efficient, legal. Next came Lydia. I found her working inside Hillridge Bakery, the same place she had run since high school. She was placing gingerbread loaves into a glass case when she saw me through the front window. I gave her a chance to finish setting up. Didn't make her come outside. The counter already smelled like cinnamon and clove, and I wasn't about to let ghosts sour that. "Lydia," I said as I walked in. She looked up, wind chime bells above the door still shaking. "Malcolm," she replied with a smile, but when she saw the folder under my arm, something flicked behind her eyes. Not fear, but awareness. "I'm asking for a favor," I said. "I wouldn't if it weren't serious." She came around the counter without needing explanation. "It about that will we signed back in summer." "It is," I said. I passed her the scanned copy. "Your signature's here. I just need your confirmation, a notarized form, and anything from that day, texts, notes, calendar, screenshots, just to back up your memory." Lydia took a slow breath. "I remember him telling us not to mention it. Said he didn't want to deal with family drama." "I understand, but right now, drama found us anyway." She led me to her office in back, small but neat, framed photos of her kids on the shelves alongside jars of jam she probably gave away at Christmas. I waited while she pulled up her phone and scrolled through old messages. After a few minutes, she turned the screen around. A text from Grandpa, August 17th, 9:12 m. "Appreciate you stopping by with Kurt later." Just 2 signatures on a witness line. Below that, her reply, "Happy to help, Arthur. What time?" I felt a knot inside me unclench. We printed it, signed a statement, and she even let me scan both before I left. By noon, I had a file folder half an inch thick. Photos, statements, dates. I walked it all into Rob's office, sat across from him while he flipped through each section, nodding slowly the way lawyers do when the wheels are already turning behind the quiet. "You've got a strong case," he said, flicking a fingertip on the witness testimony. "And if this will is proven to be the latest and the other one was submitted knowingly despite that, well, your cousin's going to have a rough season." "I don't care about her season," I muttered. "I care about putting his name back where it should be." Rob raised his eyebrows. "Fair." The days that followed felt slow in motion but fast at heart. I didn't speak a word to Riley, even as the group messages filled with her chirping about getting Dad's patio table sandblasted and stained or ordering throw pillows in moss green. She had no idea the filings had already hit. No clue that the court would soon notify her there was a dispute. Meanwhile, I kept receipts, every quote she requested, every paint sample she posted, every shopping bag her friend tagged, and a photo from the porch swing that used to be mine. I didn't engage, didn't reach out, but every click of documentation I saved was a scalpel under the surface, because she had hidden her cuts under smiles and I had no intention of matching her mask. Tuesday morning, I got an email from Rob. One line, hearing scheduled, probate court, 17th, 8:30 am. That evening, I drove by the house. The porch light was on, the blinds were drawn. I saw the flicker of a TV through one of the front windows, a smear of fresh paint along the sill. One of Grandpa's old wind chimes still swayed near the bay tree. As I sat in the dark car across the narrow street, I didn't feel victorious. I felt ready. The court date hit her like a crash. I arrived an hour early, checked in with the clerk, and sat in the back corner of the room. There was something sacred in the silence of that space. Old wooden benches, a large seal on the wall, the kind of place where people assumed truth would settle all by itself. I wasn't so naive. Truth needed teeth. Mine were sharpened, my files were neat, and today wasn't for mourning. Riley walked in 20 minutes late. She wore a white blazer and matching heels, like she thought optics would win her sympathy. I saw her scan the room, searching for faces to charm. She caught mine, paused. Her smile never reached her eyes. Her attorney swooped in beside her, juggling a tablet and a manila folder. The two of them huddled up, whispering, her face tightening as she flipped through whatever he showed her. I imagined that was the moment she saw my name on the updated filing. The real will, the real date, the real witnesses. When the judge entered, everyone stood, and I saw Riley blink like the light hurt. She never had the stomach for confrontation, but this was court, this was structure, order, legacy rendered into timelines and signatures. Rob was steady beside me, his legal pad tucked under one arm, cufflinks pressed with precision. When the judge opened with a reading of the case summary, Riley actually tried to object. "I submitted the original will," she said. Her voice echoed slightly in the chamber. To my knowledge, there was no updated version. Rob didn't flinch. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe the will referred to as original in her filing was, in fact, outdated. We've submitted a more recent document with verifiable signatures from both Mr. Everett and 2 independent witnesses." Judge Brightman tilted his head slightly, peering down with unreadable calm. "Let's take this chronologically then." They started with the dates. The signed will Riley brought in was from May of last year. Ours was from August. The witnesses Lydia and Kurt provided statements that had already been reviewed by the court, along with digital records placing them at the property on the date of signing. The judge examined the documents carefully, pausing over each one like they were pages from scripture. Riley tapped her pen furiously against the table. "This is fake," she said suddenly, rising partway from her seat. "That paper could have come from anywhere." "Be careful," the judge said, flat but sharp. "Accusations outside of evidence won't help you here." Rob slid forward a printed screenshot of the text message Grandpa had sent Lydia. Another with the email Kurt had forwarded to himself, attaching a scanned copy for safekeeping. The time-stamped metadata ran flawlessly. The signatures matched past known samples. The judge said nothing for a long stretch of time. Then he looked up. "The August document supersedes the May version." His words could have been laced in stone. Mr. Everett made his intentions clear. The house, accounts, and remaining possessions passed to Mr. Malcolm Everett under this will. Riley made a sound in her throat, half cough, half seethe. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering fiercely. She shook her head, pushed her chair back a few inches like she might bolt. "There's an additional matter," Rob said. His voice was soft, but it commanded the room. "Miss Riley Everett has already begun liquidating and spending portions of assets tied to the estate despite having knowledge that the probate process had not yet concluded. We've submitted preliminary evidence of account withdrawals, furniture purchases, and home renovations funded directly from those accounts." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Did you receive formal approval from this court to begin distribution?" Her mouth opened then shut. For the first time since she entered the room, she looked small, thin around the edges, her blazer too white for the moment. I thought my will was valid," she said. "No, you hoped it was, that's different." The room fell into a long pause. Judge Brightman shifted a few pages back and forth, then leaned forward. "The inheritance will be returned to its rightful heir. Pending a full audit, restitution will be determined by the court. Until that audit is complete, no funds are to be moved or spent by either party." It was final, it was clinical, and it landed like a hammer in velvet. When court recessed, my knees felt stiff from sitting so long. Rob clapped a hand on my shoulder. "We crossed the river," he murmured. Riley didn't move from her bench at first, just stared at the seal on the wall like it had betrayed her. I walked past her quietly, without gloating, without even looking directly at her. But I felt it, that glare trailing after me like smoke. No more pretense. just raw fury from the person who had assumed she'd never be challenged. It was strange. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vengeance either. I felt aligned, like some misordered thing had finally corrected itself. Outside, the sun was high but not warm. I stood on the steps for a moment, the file tucked under one arm, breathing in air that felt different than it had just hours before. I didn't speak to press charges. Not yet, but that door, it wasn't locked. Not anymore. I moved back into the house quietly, the same way I had once crept into the guest room on nights when my grandfather called out from pain or confusion. The front gates squealed a little, hinges Riley must have ignored, and the garden was a mess. Weeds curling up through the cracks in the brick path. Her car was gone, of course. Probably the moment she got the court order. She never liked confrontation unless she was the one holding the knife. Inside, it smelled like dust and cheap candles. She had left behind a few mismatched throw pillows, a broken wine glass perched on the windowsill, and an empty perfume bottle near the fireplace. I found a list in the kitchen written on floral stationery. Outdoor fountain, paint ceiling beams, new sconces. I read that list and thought, who the hell tries to turn legacy into a showroom? The bedroom had barely changed, save new sheets and a box of lavender incense. She hadn't even unpacked one of the trunks in the closet. My grandfather's jacket still hung there, untouched. Mothballs and the faint scent of his aftershave clinging to the fabric. I sat on the bed, which creaked in the same exact way it always had, and let the silence settle. It took me almost a week to go back into the workshop. At first, I'd just pass the window, look over, and then move on. But finally, one morning, after standing in front of the door for half a minute, I opened it. It was how I remembered. Smelled like oil and cedar and memories that had their own temperature. I sat on the same stool I'd used when I was 12, poked around in drawers, and there, it was, the old wristwatch. The band was cracked, but when I pressed the crown, the hands moved, still ticking. It made my throat tighten. I remembered how he'd pull back his sleeve and say, "Time's never still, Mal. You either use it or it uses you." Neighbors stopped by. Quiet hellos, shoulders angled in that way people do when they're trying to say more but don't know how. Grace, from 2 doors down, brought over a loaf of banana bread. Said she'd heard things were settled, with one of those looks that spoke volumes. People talk, especially when money is involved. Riley wasn't answering family texts. I knew she'd moved up north for a job she was too proud to properly describe. There was tension in the air, like a finish line had been crossed, but no one really cheered. A few family members reached out. My aunt left a voicemail that said, "I didn't know the truth." "I'm so sorry." Cousin Jonah sent a text, just a thumbs-up emoji and a photo of Grandpa working on a tractor from years ago. No words. That felt right. The irony of it all was that Riley could have had something if she hadn't tried to take everything. Grandpa was a generous man, but he valued honesty above anything. Integrity wasn't just a concept to him, it was a currency, and she had spent hers before she even understood the cost. I walked the land one morning, past the old grove where we used to camp. The trees were thinner now, a few dead limbs scattered in the grass. I remembered one summer when a storm rolled through and flattened the dock by the lake. Grandpa didn't complain, he just nodded and said, "Built once, build again." That was how he lived. That was what he taught me. I finally saw a photo of Riley weeks later. Online, a friend sent it. She was at some restaurant, laughing with people I didn't know, but there was a hollowness there. The kind no filter fixes. Her smile wasn't empty, exactly, it just didn't have roots. The audit took time, pages and pages from the bank. Details of every debit, most of it could be reversed, some of it would take longer. Rob assured me it was all on track. I just nodded, not really surprised anymore by the ways people think they can rewrite history with silence. Everyone says I won, that I came out on top, but winning is a shallow word. It implies something was gained. The truth is, this wasn't about gaining. It was about preserving what mattered. About making sure the hours I gave him, the promises he made me, the life we shared meant something. I stood on the porch one evening, the light amber across the yard, birds somewhere in the trees, that same old wind that hummed just enough to keep the mosquitoes down. I held the watch in my hand and closed my eyes. He would have hated the drama, the legal work, the arguments, but he would have understood the reason. He always understood that things don't stay fair unless someone calls out the imbalance. I never wanted revenge, just restoration. And now finally, everything was back where it should be.